Join Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, on a journey into creativity and transformation. Each episode, Marc and his guests explore the intersection of science and spirituality to uncover ways to live a more inspired life. Together, we'll navigate both the seen and unseen realms to spark joy and personal growth. This is a community where you are empowered to discover the diamond within. Marc is an award-winning psychic medium, decorated veteran, and teacher based in Seattle. Using his intuitive gifts, he guides the curious on profound soul adventures. Now, here is your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector.
All right, well, hello friends, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be in this beautiful planet of ours. This is Inspired Living. We like to say you are both the inspired and the inspiration. So let's embrace this journey together and let's inspire others and let's make every moment count before we expire. Welcome to Inspired Living, where each moment presents a chance to ignite your passions, explore your curiosities, and embrace the many wonders of both the extraordinary, the ordinary, the paranormal, which becomes normal, and science fiction that eventually becomes science fact. I am your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, thrilled to guide you on another soul adventure filled with creation, inspiration, motivation, and most importantly, discovery for the human experience and many life's journey. Together through the show, we'll uncover the unique diamonds within each of us while revealing the many wonderful hidden gems waiting to shine in our lives and around the world. Whether you're at home, at work, or on the road, or wherever life takes you, Inspired Living is crafted to uplift and recharge your spirit and to empower your dreams. Inspired Living is about building a supportive community where we celebrate each victory, no matter how big or how small. And each episode features incredible guests who have faced challenges, loss, failure, defeat, but have persevered and pursued their passions, their goals, and motivations, making a positive impact in their respective fields and making our world a much better place. You can expect engaging discussions, perspectives, thought-provoking questions, and actionable steps to transform and manifest inspiration into reality. I do want to say thank you to all of the inspired listeners, both locally, around the United States, and the globe. Your support through listening, downloading, subscribing, and leaving reviews has made Inspired Living a best inspirational, introspective, and spiritual podcast show to follow. And it's very humbling for that. We're on some many lists with amazing people that do inspirational work, and we just want to say thank you for following the show. And now streaming through Om Times Television, and you can also get us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts in the future. If you haven't subscribed, liked, or followed the show yet, there's still time to do so. You can connect with us over on our main social media platforms of Facebook under Inspired Living, Instagram, Blue Sky, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Just look for the handle Inspired for Us. That's the number 4. Or you can check us out on our YouTube channel, Inspired Living. And we're also streaming now through Audible, Alexa, and again, wherever you enjoy your favorite podcast show. So let's get ready to be inspired, uplifted, and motivated, because I always like to say the best is always yet to come. So let's go prospecting together through body, through the mind, through the spirit. And we hope that you enjoyed this show. And today the show is going to feature yours truly, your host, Marc Lainhart. We're going to be doing journeys through loss and grief. And I'm going to share with you some personal moments of how I became the Intuitive Prospector and how I started to do work in the fields of spirituality, healing, psychic, metaphysics, mediumship, things that I never in a million years thought I'd ever do, to be honest with you, let alone be doing a show and a podcast to talk about these very personal moments. But I want to start off with a quote, because I found that inspirational people that you may know or may not know has really inspired me to do these shows each and every time I come on the air. And I want to start with Morgan Freeman, who had quoted, and he said this: learning how to be still, to really be still and let life happen, that stillness becomes a radiance. And I found that to be very true. Stillness, through the silence and stillness, there is many answers to be gleaned. Many gurus from the past, whether it's Lao Tzu, whether it's Rumi, they always talked about stillness. And that was always fascinating to me, because it was years ago at the age of 27. that I was just living a normal life, not really thinking about life, death, spirituality, my own journey. In a former life, I was, working. At this time, I had just gotten out of the U.S. Coast Guard and was a firefighter, EMT, and being in service to help my community, helping people out in a time of need, being called to other people's troubles and trials and tribulations. And I received a phone call that my little brother had been murdered. And when you receive that call, your life changes in an instant. And today we're going to be talking about how to work through grief, how to work through loss, and how we can find those answers in the stillness. I find that when we lose something, loss changes everything, whether it's the death of a loved one like my brother's, the end of a relationship, or just the quiet fading of a part of ourselves that will mark a turning point. Now, unbeknownst to me, I didn't realize that things would get actually quite dire, quite severe. What I call today the trauma and the tragedy, or if you put those together, TNT, like a bomb that blew my life up. Because it was after I received this call of my brother being murdered, we were still in the grieving format of losing my young father-in-law, Don, to the horrible disease of multiple sclerosis. And so we were in the grieving mode. My wife had just lost her dad and didn't get to carry on with that relationship. And he had moved to the other side. And it's a horrible, horrible disease, multiple sclerosis is, and being just a part of that and witnessing a loved one go through that. And for me, that really was my first personal death. I had been, in an industry where I had worked professionally, working with death and dying, body recovery, airplane crashes, et cetera, et cetera. But this was really a personal loss to me. My first loss was with my grandma. I was actually with her when she transitioned, which I call the beautiful pain, the beauty of being there at the time of transition, but also the pain of watching that person no longer having that physical touch. But on today's show, we're going to talk about just because they're gone in body doesn't mean that they're not around us. They're actually quite around us. And I'm going to give you a real-time example of that and some exercises to help you through your grief, or what I call today honoring your grief. But through that timeline, 2 decades ago, after losing my father-in-law to multiple sclerosis, getting the phone call that my brother had been murdered for, at that time, it'd be illegal drugs, which in this day and age, it's marijuana or cannabis plants, which is actually legal in my state. Not legal everywhere, but still just the irony of it. And so we went back home to, figure out what had happened. We didn't know who had murdered him. It would be months later that we'd actually find out who did it. But when we were there, it would be 3 days later that I would get the notification that my older brother. So I have my younger brother, my older brother, and I'm in the middle. And my older brother actually was at work and he collapsed and they rushed him to the hospital. And so I went from burying my brother on Thursday, Michael, to going out to the hospital in the valley to understand that my older brother was terminal with brain cancer, also known as glioblastoma, right here on the left temporal of his brain. It had spread throughout his brain. He only had a few months to live. And so those 3 events really, so you take grief anytime, and I've worked over the years, I've worked through many different modalities, whether it's hypnotherapy, grieving counseling, biofeedback, you name it, I've probably done it. And a lot of times when you lose a family member, especially to murder or some sort of tragic event, you're already pegged out at the stress scale. You're already at the max. So then you compound those on top of what I was already going through with my father-in-law and now my older brother for his brain cancer treatment, because he would actually go a little bit longer than the terminal diagnosis. But dealing with that can be very, very hard. That's why I call it the TNT that blew my life up. So I want to talk about some spiritual aspects. I want to share with you today about anatomy and physiology of who we are and what we do. And we're going to just spend this next, episode talking about how to journey through loss and grief, but also not let it overcome you and actually be able to survive through severe, tragic scenarios like what I went through. And like I said, this happened to me years ago, but what it did is it put me to be in front of you today, talking with you, sharing with you through this format, through this podcast. And one of the things that I found to be very, very interesting, animals, take for example, animals like elephants or dolphins or a wolf pack, they seem to experience loss and even have a period of mourning. I know that there's a pod here I live here in Seattle, and we have the J pod that comes through, and there was still one of the orca whales that was carrying her dead baby with her months after the baby had died, and that's a way of honoring your grief. And the mourning that takes place. But for us as only human beings experience deep grief when a loss occurs. It's part of our self-awareness, and handling grief requires learning more about the healing power of who we are, self-awareness. And at that moment of loss, that prospect is out of reach. Grief, when I was going through this, it starts as a shock and awe to the nervous system. It's then followed by your first set of what we would call painful thoughts, and could I have done something different, especially if any of you have experienced suicide. I've experienced suicide both in my family and with friends, and there's that emotion that comes up of could I have done something different for that person to help them in their time of need. And so these are all the things that we're going to go through with the journeys through loss and grief. And one of the things that I want to talk about is, many of you may know this concept from Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who back in 1969 created this one. I wasn't aware of that before this time, but I became aware of it after the loss and the grief of losing family members. And it's called the DABDA model. And the DABDA model is the emotions that we're going to go through. It's not linear, okay? So some of these that I'm going to talk about, you may have experienced, and you may not experience none of them, and you may choose not to experience any of those. But this was a model that tried to help us as self-awareness of how to deal with grief and loss and how to continue on. And a lot of the times, the first thing that'll step in is the denial, especially if somebody is terminal, like my brother, who was terminal with brain cancer at the young age of 35. There was that denial, not only from him, but from us as a family. Like, how can this be happening? He has so much life ahead of him. And same with my brother, Michael, who's 21. My father-in-law was 47. So 47, 35, 21, all young ages. And, that first emotion that comes up is that denial. Is this happening? And so she created this model to understand the emotional construct and us as human beings and what we go through. The next is the anger of why this is happening to us, why this is happening to the person, especially if it's terminal. And then we get into bargaining. There's something I can do to get out of this situation. So we have denial, we have anger, we have bargaining. And then the last two of that model, the DABDA model, is depression, and then finally acceptance. And the depression is something that for those of you that have gone through loss, whether it's a friend, a family member, or a fur baby, it still resonates. I'm actually grieving right now for my fur baby, and I'll give you a story about what this entails and the synchronicities and the coincidences of everything. But understanding that these emotions are going to be natural, and there's no timeline for grief. That's the one thing that I remember people saying to me during that very traumatic time was, oh, it'll get better over time. It heals over time, but you can have trigger moments that take you right back to that moment. And so to me, it shows me that time is a great illusion, right? Because you go back, these triggers of your traumas can take you back to, you're not acting the age you are, you're acting the age that you were. So I was 27 at the time. And people would say, oh, time heals. It is healed, but grief is something that we take with us. It's something that becomes a part of your journey moving forward. And it's all about how you want to handle it. How do you want to take this journey of loss and grief? Do you want to carry it like a heavy suitcase, or maybe put it on your back as a more manageable way as a backpack? For me, it was years of, like I said, therapy and survivor's guilt. And I was carrying it like two things of luggage, like heavy luggage, really just weighing me down. Anxiety, depression, PTSD, all of that encompasses loss. And eventually, through self-awareness, through acceptance, awareness is the greatest agent for change. Eckhart Tolle teaches us that. And I found that to be very true. When you become aware and you realize that death is not the end of the journey, it's only a temporary moment. And now some people watching this may be saying, well, I don't believe in afterlife. And that's fine, because many philosophies, many scriptures, many gurus talk about the afterlife. Some call it the Summerland afterlife, the after spirit, heaven, hell. Some of you may not even believe in that. You may believe that it's one shot and you're done, and that's it, right? The atheist approach, which I can understand. The agnostic approach, which is proof that there is something. That is, over time, is what it's proved to me through intelligent communications, through spiritual interactions, through what I say is called paranormal or phenomenon that becomes normal to me. That's my confirmation that there is something after what we call death. It's a big part of what I do today. And so I always question, the sense of our reality. What if life is the dream? What if this is all the dream? And then when we die is when we actually wake up, right? Because you think about the states of consciousness that you're in, and you got to remember, before you were born, you were in a very tight space, very dark, breathing liquid. And all of a sudden there's this light at the end of the tunnel, and you come out and you incarnate into the physical form, and you take that first breath. Right? And now you have this thing called life, and this journey of life that's in front of you for however many next years you have, whether it's 21 years, 35 years, 47 years, 55 years, what have you. And so, what if life is the dream, and when we die, that is us waking up? Or some would theorize the light at the end of the tunnel that people talk about during death. Now, I've had my own near-death experience, and I didn't have any light at the end of the tunnel. But what if the light at the end of the tunnel is us coming out again to do it all over again? We don't know, right? That's the curiosity. That's the great question of the human experience. But I can tell you, through this loss, through watching my brothers and my father-in-law move into spirit world, and just as recently, my awesome fur baby O'Malley, who was an awesome cat and was in our life for 15 years, there's going to be synchronicities and coincidences if you're open to that and you're aware of that. So one of the quotes that I loved is from Helen Keller. And she says this, quote, "When we have once enjoyed, we can never lose. All that we love deeply becomes part of us." And when you realize that this journey is all about love, one day we'll remember how lucky we were to have known their love with wonder and not grief. And that can be one of the first things that you can start to move into, to honor your grief and to have this journey, knowing that being alive is also going to be part of experiencing loss and grief. And what it's done for me over this last 2 decades of studying and educating myself and being mentored and going to different locations around the world as the Intuitive Prospector, to understand who I am, the time that I have left, and the appreciation for the relationships that I have. Because right now, I'm in that grieving mode. This cat. Now, some of you may be watching this like, oh, it's an animal. Well, I find animals to be very awesome. 1, 2. This was our 4th cat that we had in our journey since being alive, and he was with us for 15 years. But he was an awesome cat. He was like a ragdoll cat. You could do anything, but he was always so loving. And we had to put him down January 30th, so just about a month ago. And January is interesting because both my brothers passed in January. Now my totem animal spirit Moose, who had been with us for 15 years, I had to put him down at the end of January. So January is not my most favorite month, right? But we put him down January 30th, and then we've never really gotten any kind of altar or any kind of way to honor our former 3 cats. But there was something special about this cat. And for today's show, before I came on the air, somebody knocked on the door, and I had forgotten that we had ordered this beautiful candle. And this is what's right off camera here. Is this beautiful candle. Now, what's the irony of this? What's the synchronicity? What's the coincidence? What are the odds that this candle, which has his ashes infused into the candle itself, what are the odds that he would show up in a different form on the day that I'm talking about journeys through loss and grief while grieving him? That to me is the coincidence. That's the synchronicity. Carl Jung talked about synchronicities as a way of confirming what can't be spoken with words. Einstein always talked about synchronicities and coincidences of God's way of trying to remain anonymous of who God is. And the little pack of cards that came with it that fell on the ground is called Wolfie's Wish. And it's a little pack of cards that came with the candle, and it's grieving cards for pet owners. So I have found in this journey that sometimes we grieve more of our animals than we do our actual fellow humans. It's quite fascinating. But one of the things that I want to share with you during this time is not only that DABDA model that I was talking about denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, but I also want to talk about just some things of understanding grief, the content of what that is. What's the definition of loss and grief? You can explain that loss comes from various sources, whether it's death, divorce, job loss, etc. And grief is the human emotional response to that loss. And so for the purpose of this show, I want to set the intention for you as the audience to highlight that the journey through grief is a personal and unique timeline. Okay. And there is your timeline, and everybody grieves differently, right? But we're also going to do some mindfulness exercises that can begin with just a simple breath exercise and moving into understanding what grief is. Now, there's different types of grief. There's anticipatory grief. This is grieving before loss actually happens, often seen in terminal illness, which I experienced with my father-in-law and my older brother from brain cancer. Then there's complicated grief. This is when the intensity of the grief doesn't ease over time. This is something where a murder or somebody dies in a tragic accident. That's the complicated grief, which can have a much longer timeline. Then, of course, we have a collective grief. And the collective grief is where we share in the emotions experienced by us as a community. And it's usually seen in pandemics or great tragedies or airplane crashes. And I've been a part of all three of these, whether it's anticipatory, whether it's complicated, or whether it's collective. And some of the things that can really play a part in this journey of loss and grief and trying to get to a stillness to heal is, symptoms like anxiety, fatigue. That's something we've experienced the last few weeks. But we know we're fatigued, but we honor our grief by acknowledging that self-awareness of what I'm talking about. Changes in sleep patterns. Things just don't seem to bring joy to, foods or concerts or music. And so I'm going to give you some ways to stimulate what is called the vagus nerve. This is something that's very ancient and something that can be worked with. Maybe you're new to this, maybe you know all about it. But today's show is to help you, and we'll do that in the second half of the show. But this is to understand the types of grief, what we can go through both physically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually. And then we're going to give, some exercises. One is about the vagus nerve. The other one is called a 5-finger meditation. And of course, there's an inner ear exercise that we're going to do. And then now that we're on streaming through Home Times Television, I can actually show you. The podcast, you won't be able to see it because you're listening to it, but you'll get an idea, and I'll try to explain it as best I can. And my personal testimony is just sharing with you, been there, done that, got the t-shirt a couple times. And so I definitely understand the deep impact of loss and grief, but I also understand, as part of this show, as part of Inspired Living, is what we can do to take action and encouragement and motivation to heal and to keep going on this journey of life, because we don't know when the end of our life is, right? It's the only one account that we never know how much our balance is, right? We know our checking account, our savings account, our 401, right? Our car payment, our mortgage payment, how much do we have left? But the one thing that's always been fascinating to me is the essence of time. And that's the one account we don't know how much of the balance remains. So it becomes very important through the loss in this journey of loss and grief is to recognize that all you have is right now, the present moment, as I light this candle for Moosey in his jar filled with his ashes that came today, to synchronize and let me know that he's still thinking of me, even though he can't speak to me because he doesn't have a vibration off a vocal cord. That's the spirit of language. That's something I've come to understand through the metaphysical journey, through the spiritual journey, through great loss, through my own near-death experience, that the universe will talk to you. It's not going to be usually a big booming voice from the sky. And if it is, I'd love to have you on the show so we can talk about that. But it's usually going to come through what I teach on: signs, symbols, synergies, and synchronicities. And those synchronicities is exactly what happened on today's show. Somebody knocked on the door. I didn't know who it was. They handed me this blue box. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. Open it up. I had actually forgotten that we had ordered this vase back at the first part of February, and today it's middle of March. And so that is, to me, that's a synchronicity. That's a coincidence where the language is spirit. And what it does, if you have this coincidence or this synchronicity of your loved one, a family member, a friend, or a fur baby, if it triggers in your mind here, this is advanced communication. This is primitive communication. You understand me through the language, but it's also a vibration off a vocal cord. This, over the years, is what I've come to understand, that when you're open and aware and accepting of, just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not here, you realize there's a lot of things going on around us. And again, the signs, the symbols, the synergy. And synergy is what your heart radiates out and the energy that's all around. Everything has energy. This cup of tea has energy. This mouse has energy. This pen has energy. This protein shake has energy. And so the synergy is the blending of the energies all around you. I even have a multimeter right off camera here just to see if I can keep it up, if it'll go and light up. If you see this light, let me turn it a little bit out, move the candle over a little bit. If you see this light light up, this is called a EMF meter that measures. And I have this just so I can have my peripheral, because I get a lot of peripheral hits. If this lights up, that tells me the energy in the space has shifted, because everything is energy. And if you want to unlock the secrets of the universe, you have to start thinking in terms of energy, frequency, vibration, not primitive voice vibration off a vocal cord, right? And so if that sign or symbol or that synergy or that synchronistic event, and you're in a grieving mode, I always tell people, did they send you a sign? Well, I don't know. I wasn't really thinking about it. I wasn't looking for it. But awareness is the greatest agent for change. And once that language is developed, you understand the language, it's connecting through the third eye, the pineal gland. And we'll talk about the vagus nerve after the break here. You realize that you are the equipment, and you are much more powerful, and you're an antenna that can receive and perceive different information if you're open to that. Nothing nefarious, nothing scary. I've been doing this work for 2 decades now, and I haven't found it to be fearful or scary or demonic or any of that BS. But what it did for me when I got this vase today from O'Malley with his ashes, you can see the ashes. His ashes are infused in the candle. Knock on the door. Here's your box. Thank you. What is it? Oh, this is awesome. I'm about to do this show. Let's bring him in. That's the coincidences and the synchronicities and the power of spirit to communicate us on a whole different level. All you're doing is you're raising your consciousness, you're raising your vibration. And in this journey, you almost have to unlearn, just like I did years ago when these traumas and tragedies started happening to me. I had to unlearn a lot of stuff that I was taught because I was having experiences that I couldn't explain. So we're going to go to our break. We're going to be back here in just a few minutes. I hope you're enjoying today's show, Journeys Through Loss and Grief, with your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. And we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Om Times TV.
Billions of people walk this earth, yet there is only one you. Life offers endless connections, lessons, and moments of awakening. Are you ready to explore the beauty of this world, the healing energy that surrounds you, and your own soul adventure? Marc Lainhart, known as the Intuitive Prospector, is a trusted guide on that path. An internationally recognized psychic medium, medical intuitive, and spiritual advisor, Marc blends experience with heart-centered insight. From decorated veteran and first responder to teacher, minister, author, podcast host, and mentor, his journey has been one of service and discovery. His mission is simple: to help you awaken, heal, grow, and uncover the diamond within while discovering the hidden gems life has placed around you. Dare to explore. Dare to rise. Learn more at marclainhart.com and discover the Intuitive Prospector online.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
All right, welcome back to Inspired Living. I'm your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. So before the break, we were talking about ways that we can acknowledge our grief, honor our grief. And today's show is about journeys through loss and grief, and just kind of sharing with you my personal journey of how I went through some very dark and turbulent times, some dark and stormy times. But through the storm, a sailor develops their sea legs not by calm seas, but by rough seas. And Eckhart Tolle, who I read in these early years of understanding death and dying, he talked about, quote, stillness is where creativity and solutions to problems are found, end quote. And that kind of stuck with me. Okay, what are some of the solutions to the loss of losing, watching a brother go through brain cancer, hearing that a brother had been murdered, and we didn't even know who his murderers were. It would be months later that we'd find out, and then have to go through 5 murder trials. So this grieving period lasted for well over 2+ years, from my father-in-law to my little brother to my older brother. And so grief is a part of our life and part of our journey. And one of the things that I really started through some of my therapies that I did, including biofeedback, when you're 27 years old and you're young and you're arrogant and you're cocky, I don't need help, right? Just rub some dirt on it, man up. That's actually one of the buttons I have right here, man up. Man up. And I went through, and I was actually forced to go through this biofeedback through the military. At the time I was in the Coast Guard, and I was actually required to go through 8 sessions. And from the first session, I went in with a lot of skepticism, which I think is normal and healthy to have that skeptical mind, that challenging mind, that logical mind, that analytical mind. And I'm pointing to the left side of my temporal brain here for a reason. But from that first episode, I got hooked up to all these machines, my pulse, my breath, my heart rate, everything, saturation and my O2 saturation. And through visualization and through breath work and through guided meditations, over the course of those 8 sessions, I could see, for my own skepticism, I could see that there was a benefit to being still, to practicing visualizations, to practicing meditations. And what that did is it started to take me into the Intuitive Prospector, to prospect through body, mind, and spirit. And that took me to the University of Washington to take my graduate studies in sports medicine and human performance, because I thought that's the way I would be going. Unbeknownst to me, life had a different course that I didn't really want to sign up for. But I love what I do now. But through that course, so I actually tell people I went to college to learn how to meditate. And through this course, it was visualizations, manifestations, meditations for the professional athlete. It had really nothing to do with spirituality, psychic, mediumship, any of that. And it was all about professional athletes. And so through that is where I actually, so this would have been about 2008. This is where I started to meditate. And it's through that stillness and that power of stealing the mind that my brother started to come through. My father-in-law started to come through. And I started to have awareness that there was a whole other world. Now, for those of you that have never experienced that, put yourself in my shoes for a second and go, holy smokes, what the heck is happening? I have literally gone off the rails, lost my mind, right? But as my mentor would teach me later, a crazy person can't self-diagnose, because if you've gone crazy, you don't know you've gone crazy. But you feel like you're going crazy. That's where they talk about the spiritual awakening, that you feel like you're almost losing your mind. Like, Ram Dass talked about it. The more unreal the world around you gets, the more real you get. And I can look at the world right now and how unreal it is and go, wow, there's a lot of unrealness out there. The more real you get about your own journey, the present moment, right? And so through that course, through my graduate studies that I ended up finishing and graduating a year later, that really put me more on a metaphysical, spiritual, psychic sciences, mediumship, healing, transformation journey to understand. And that brings me to what we would call the vagus nerve. Now that's spelled not Las Vegas nerve, it's VAGUS. And the vagus nerve is one of the longest and most complex of the 12 cranial nerves, acting as a critical communication, or what we would call a superhighway, between your brain, your heart, several organs going all the way down into your abdominal. It's also known as the cranial nerve X. And this was fascinating to me, because the Latin word for this vagus nerve is literally wandering, reflecting its extensive path, again, from the brainstem through the neck and chest all the way down through the abdomen. Now, what does the vagus nerve do? The vagus nerve is great for heart rate and blood pressure. It sends signals slowly down your heart rate and regulates your blood pressure to keep you calm. It's also part of your digestive tract. It's also part of your immune response. It's also part of your sensory motor control. So this nerve, this vagus nerve, acts, it's literally a pair of nerves, left and right, and it's unique because it builds what we call biodirectional communication. So it can go back and forth, right? So you have like the super highways of this cranial nerve X or the vagus nerve. And again, it does, it plays a vital role in the inflammatory reflex process, helping you to reduce inflammation in your body. I don't know about all you, but when I am grieving, I am not the person that loses weight. I'm actually the person that puts on a lot of weight. I got very, very heavy during those times because the body unconsciously will protect itself. And sometimes it protects itself by actually adding weight to protect, to layer. But when it comes to the vagus nerve, this super highway that's going back and forth, it's also digestive. So it actually, controls the movement of food through your digestive tract, and it triggers the release of stomach acid and digestive enzymes. But most importantly, it's really the fight or flight mechanism, because a lot of times we're either in fight, flight, but I want you to get to that freeze aspect of the nervous system, the adrenals, your auric field. And one of the things that I learned early on, and this is something that you can do, and I'm going to give you a couple examples on how to stimulate the vagus nerve. Because when you stimulate the vagus nerve, whether let's say you're going through a very intense time or you're going through grief, like I am right now, how do I handle that? And this is where I've seen people overcome with anxiety, depression, really dark negativity, where it can lead to suicide ideations and suicidal thoughts, suicidal actions. And so it can be a very dangerous place to be. And of course, I'm not a professional counselor, but I always advise people, whether it's medical intuitive or psychology or grieving counseling, go seek somebody that's actually certified and has passed and has sat in front of a board. Now, I'm a healthcare provider, certified healthcare provider, but I am not an actual board certified anything. So I always give that disclaimer. You can come to somebody like me and we can work through some modalities and through some exercises, but you need to always go see your naturopath, your doctor, your psychologist, a counselor. Like I go to a professional spiritual counselor for my journey, right? So that's always important because they've actually spent years in their education in that topic. But what happens when you want to stimulate the vagus nerve, it can help reduce that anxiety. It can help reduce the depression. It can help reduce those monkeys in your mind that are running around telling you all the negative self-crap, self-sabotage that you just don't need, right? And so these exercises that I'm going to share with you today are things that I've learned along the path of my journey. And one of the first things that we're going to talk about, it's very simple, is, putting an emotion, bringing the emotion to your awareness by naming it. So for example, I am grieving with the loss of my awesome fur baby, O'Malley, who is now, his ashes are in a vase. He's not here, right? I missed that. But what I can do is I can acknowledge that grief, that pain, that anger, that denial, and acknowledge it in my material world and say, you know what? I wish I could hug him one more time. That's what I was actually thinking this morning when I got the vase, without getting upset or crying. I wish I could just hug him one more time, but I can't have that. So then I can name that emotion. And I call it the hug that I'll never get. And I can feel that hug. I can actually visualize that hug. I can see him coming up and cuddling me, and him, used to come up and sit on my chest. We used to have what we call moosey mantras. I'd give him positive mantras and he would just stare into my soul. It was awesome. But I'm acknowledging my emotions through the hug emotions, and I've named it hug. I'm feeling it. I'm processing it, but I'm not going to dwell on it. Now I'm going to let it go. And by releasing it, now I've actually acknowledged the pattern of emotions, because again, grief and loss is an emotional response to what happens to us in life. And so I can now release that, and it helps, doesn't take the heartache fully away, but it helps bring the burden down. It helps bring those thoughts down. And then what we can start to work on is the power of breath. So we're going to stimulate the vagus nerve, because the vagus nerve, like I said, goes from the crown chakra, the top of the head, all these nerves, super highways, left and right, going all the way down. And what you can start to do is just the power of breath. I know it seems simple, but a lot of people don't even breathe the right way. And the right way to breathe through the power of meditation is to breathe in through your nose. And as you breathe in the air through your nose, the reason you breathe in through your nose is there's a passageway that actually is a filter system, for one. And two, it warms the air as the warmth circulates down into the lungs. If you're to breathe in through your mouth, you're bypassing this filter system. free will and choice. You can choose to be a mouth breather. I choose not to. But when you breathe in the right way, you're actually filtering and you're warming the air as it comes into the lungs, and you're expanding the lungs. And so the power of breath, and I believe in it so much, it's my tattoo. It's one of the oldest Sanskrits known to mankind, is the power of breath. Breath in, inhalation. Life is not a straight line, right? It's not linear. It's usually what resists persists, and the lesson repeats until it completes, and then we exhale the final breath, right? We inhale when we incarnate, and when we decarnate, we exhale. So work with me on just the power of breath. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a 5-finger meditation. And the 5 fingers, this is something that I learned back through my days, not just through biofeedback, but through the Cleveland Clinic when I was going online to learn some of their studies of how to deal with PTSD and anxiety, depression, suicide ideations, that kind of thing. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your hand and you're going to hold your hand up, and you've got your 5 fingers. And this is just a good way to practice. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your finger at the base of your thumb. And as you start to scroll up your thumb, you're going to take a deep breath in. Breathing in the right way through the nose, using the right mechanics, the right fundamentals, breathing in. And when you breathe in, your chest should actually kind of go back, and your stomach should extend out. That's breathing true. That's breathing deep, right? This in Qigong, in the philosophy of Chinese Qigong, which is a study of energy and the study of your energy. This is called the Dantian. And what you want to do is you want to warm up your Dantian. There's 3 levels of the Dantian. The heater is what it's called. And so when you breathe in, you're going to have your 5 fingers, and you're going to breathe in on the thumb. Hold for a second on that thumb. And as you start to go down into the gap, breathe out. And as you start to circle up your index finger, breathe in, breathing true, breathing deep. Get to the top of that first index finger and hold your breath for a second. You can do like a 4 count, a 5 count. And then start to slide into the gap of the second finger, move into your middle finger, breathing out. Pause for a second. You're going to pause in each gap, right? And then you're going to take another nice deep breath in. You're going to start to climb up your middle finger, taking that deep breath in as much air as you can until you get to the top of your middle finger. And when you reach the top of your finger, the middle finger, hold your breath and count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And with a nice sigh, if you want to do an Om, look at the meter behind me. Meter behind me is totally lighting up. I don't know if y'all saw that. Go down the middle finger, going down to the gap, and exhale. Get to the gap of that third finger, the ring finger. Pause for a second, do a count of 4, and then start to take another nice deep breath in. And as you start to come up the index finger, the ring finger, get to the top of that ring finger and hold. And you're literally touching each finger, because touch is important too. This is stimulating the vagus nerve. And when you're ready after a 4 count, exhale, going down the ring finger, down to the gap. Now you're down to your pinky finger. You can take another nice deep breath, going up the pinky finger. Hold at the top of the pinky finger for a count of 4 or 5 or 6. You can go a little bit longer. I usually do an 8 to 10 count. And when you're ready, do a nice big sigh. Let that air out, and you're going to trace down the pinky finger until you're down to your wrist. And then you turn your hand over and you start again. Going up the thumb, up the index finger, up the middle finger, up the ring finger, up the pinky finger. Taking deep breaths in on the incline, pausing at the top. Exhaling on the decline, down to the gap, pausing in the gap. Taking another nice deep breath. And what will happen, just that little exercise, you'll actually start to warm up. And that's why we call this the Dantian, warming up the Dantian heater. That's one way of stimulating the vagus nerve. Just a 5-finger meditation. How simple is that, right? You can actually count on your 5 fingers. If I can do it, you can do it, right? So the other one that you can do, there's a couple other things that you can do to stimulate the vagus nerve. One is music. Music is very, very powerful for stimulating the vagus nerve, calming the mind, relaxing. So you can use breath work with music. You can use a 5-finger meditation like we just did. You can do a guided meditation. These are all the ways to trigger the vagus nerve. Sound vibration. You'll see in the studio, I have a lot of singing bowls because I believe in the frequency, and that's the future of medicine, is frequency and vibration. We're already seeing that with lasers that vibrate at a certain frequency that can actually break up cancer cells and also break up kidney stones, right? We're already seeing that. And so I imagine that in the next 10 to 20 years, we'll see even more, especially with robotics, especially with AI coming out. But as far as stimulating the vagus nerve, what that's going to do, it's going to help you to navigate these difficult pathways that you may find yourself in. Again, meditations, visualizations, breath work, music. Another great one that I love doing, and I do it every morning, is cold therapy. Now, I take a cold shower, and I really, if you want to feel a panic and get that vagus nerve stimulated, sit in a cold shower. Now, I live here in the Puget Sound, and that water temp is about 51 degrees. So I can go out and swim for about 3 to 5 minutes. There's actually a lady that I've seen many times without a wetsuit that's actually swimming. She has a buoy that she pulls behind her in case she cramps up, then she can float on the buoy and not drown. But I'm like, good for you, lady. Good for you. She's got to be in her late 50s, early 60s. And she's out there swimming for like 10 minutes in this 51-degree weather temperature of the Puget Sound. So cold therapy is a great way to stimulate the vagus nerve. And of course, I always say, if you have heart conditions, check with your professional provider. But cold showers, swimming in a cold bath, sitting in cold baths. You see a lot of athletes do it after their performance. You can even just take a cold pack and put it on the back of your neck. These cold therapies are great ways to stimulate the vagus nerve, that super highway that I'm talking about, so you can manage your grief, so you can try to heal and accept and transform the journey that you're on, because sometimes it feels overwhelming. And trust me, I've been there. I understand it greatly. That's why I'm sharing with you my personal story today. Another way that you can do is sound baths, massage, reflexology. There's a reason we call it the sole of our foot, is because in the sole of our foot, there are many pressure points that go to many organs throughout the entire body. So if you've never had sacrocranial or reflexology massage, highly recommend it as a way to stimulate and to honor your grief and to manage your grief and loss. But again, we're using ways to stimulate that vagus nerve, that super highway of nerves that go from, the top of the head all the way down to the soles of your feet. Why do we call it the soles of our feet, right? These are always things I always question, the curiosities, right? Why are these called the temples, right? And we've got our orbital, eye orbitals, the temples, the third eye, and so for me, that is always been fascinating and interesting, because we, from an anatomy and physiology standpoint, we are a very, very powerful, energetic reality. Einstein always talked about the 3.5 pound brain in, it's on average 3.5 pounds when you weigh it from an autopsy standpoint. He always said it was always one of the most complex organisms in the universe. And that's always kind of sat with me, right? And the curiosity. And that's what inspired living is all about. The paranormal, the normal, the science fiction becoming science fact, the ordinary, the extraordinary, and things that we just don't understand yet. But imagine what you didn't know 20 years ago and how different the future looks today from 20 years ago, and how different it's going to look 20 years from now. So these are all great ways to stimulate the vagus nerve. Like I said, cold therapy, massage, acupuncture is a great way to stimulate the vagus nerve. Again, I've done all of these, so I can speak to all of them. Powerful meditations. For me, the journey of plant medicine this last year has been very insightful, in working with different plant medicines to understand the connection to us in nature and our purpose and our journey here of consciousness. The last one that I'll share with you, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Music, playing instruments. You can see I'm surrounded by my drums, my guitar. I got a finger piano. I got a singing bowl. I've got my flute right off camera here. These are all ways to stimulate the vagus nerve. But the point of stimulating the vagus nerve is to actually be able to deal with your grief and the loss that you might be experiencing. But the last one I want to share with you before we call it a day, and we'll be back for another episode. We're going to have an awesome guest on. We have a couple guest books, so I'm excited to talk with them and the different topics that we're going to talk about. But the last one, to really stimulate, you can do this while you're listening, not while you're driving. Hopefully you're not driving while you do this. You can take your finger and stick it just inside your ear, not in the ear hole. Don't stick it in your ear hole towards your eardrum. Stick it right in the curvature of the ear right here. And what's fascinating to me about just anatomy and physiology, the ear itself, if you take the ear and lay it side by side, it looks like a baby inside the placenta, and you lay them side by side. Fascinating, right? But what you're going to do is you're going to stick your finger just inside your ear. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a nice deep breath, and you're going to rotate inside the ear, because the vagus nerve is actually connected, and you can actually do chanting. Om. You can feel that vibration in the inner ear. Inner ear is fascinating because it stimulates your balance, right? Some people get vertigo. A lot of that's because of the inner ear. But what you're going to do is you're going to just lightly, gently circulate in your inner ear, and take a deep breath, and just do this for about a minute. breathing in, breathing out, breathing in what you want, exhaling what you don't. And you're going to actually trigger the vagus nerve. And after about a minute, just sit for a second and just see how you feel. You might feel a little like lightheaded. You might feel a little like, wow, I just feel more relaxed. That's stimulating the vagus nerve. And then you can go to the other ear and do it in the other ear for about a minute, doing it clockwise or counterclockwise, however you want to do it. So these are ways to stimulate the vagus nerve. And again, the vagus nerves helps you with fight or flight. It also regulates the nervous system, the adrenals, your auric field, which is your energy, and it helps you just to navigate the many pathways of life, especially when it comes to loss and I think that loss from the broader view, it's not simply a personal tragedy. It's part of the universal movement of life, and everything that arises transforms and eventually dissolves. That's just life. And when you realize that, if you realize that your journey is temporary, but you're not the end, because energy always has to go somewhere by the laws of physics as we understand it today. The energy in your heart has to go somewhere. And that's why I believe in the afterlife, or I believe in heaven, or I believe in life after death. People ask me all the time, Mark, where is heaven? I don't believe that heaven is an actual location as I was taught. I believe that what we would incline as consciousness or Gaia or the great love, heaven. It's a location based on vibration, not an actual physical location. And so that energy returns, love returns to source. And that's why I know that I will see my moose again. I will see my father-in-law Don again. I will see my brother Michael again. I will see my older brother Todd again, as one day I will join them, and that energy will move from this heart into the next source or the next consciousness of who we are. So I hope that I'm just encouraging you, whether through its art, through song, through poem, express your feelings through dance, share it on social media, do whatever you need. Connect with community, get with support networks, find resources that make sense to you, because again, loss is a personal journey. There is no timeline to this. Journaling is a big part of this. But as far as, like I said, visuals, interactive components like what we did today, social media engagements, communities that will help you, mentors that will help you, counselors that will help you, different things from hypnotherapy to biofeedback to grieving counselor, especially if you've lived with survivor's guilt. These are all very, very important. And it's okay to grieve. Normalizing these varied emotions that I talk about come with loss, but there is no right or way to grieve. It's just part of the human condition. And when you can get into that stillness, I promise you, through these modalities that we shared today, the stillness will actually invigorate healing, and you will see a transformation in who you are and get to that stillness, because there's just a lot of activities around us, a lot of noise. And when you can turn that noise down, the more still and silent you become, the more you'll actually hear. I got it right off camera here, my listen stone, because listen is an anagram for the same word as silent. And so if you're dealing with loss, if you're dealing with grief, honor your grief by doing what we talked about today. And, don't do it alone. Grief can be a very lonely place to be. And, he says, he who does not understand your silence will probably not understand your words. That's Albert Hubbard that talked about that. And then I'm just going to close the show with one last quote. And just to kind of recap with what Helen Keller said, what we have once enjoyed, we can never lose. All that we love deeply becomes a part of us and who we are. So thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me on this journey of human consciousness and soul adventures here on Inspired Living. And I just want to say thank you again to the inspired listeners, because doing this work and sharing this journey with you is very, very healing for me, very helpful and inspiring to me. So I just want to say thank you so much. And we'll just wrap up with, like I always do, until our next soul adventure together. Be kind, be caring, be compassionate, honor your grief, work in the present moment, lots of deep breaths, let that stuff go. And most importantly, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, discover the diamond within. And through that process, I promise you, you will start to discover the many wonderful hidden gems that are all around us, all around the world, right in front of you. And it will become apparent, because awareness is the greatest agent for change. So thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time here on Inspired Living. As I like to say, namaste, namago. Take care, everybody.